Welcome back to Modern Jubilees. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a Jubilees world map and talking about how this map applies to current events and the world as we know it today, including various conflict zones around the world. So first of all, as an introduction, Jubilees is an ancient text that was best preserved by the Ethiopian Christians and Jews in their holy Bibles. It is part of the Apocrypha of the regular Bibles, technically, but it is a holy book and it purports to be from an angel with Moses on Mount Sinai after the exodus from Egypt of the Israelites. Now, one of the most special parts of this book is chapters 8 and 9 of the book, in which, after the episode of Noah's Ark, now Noah's children and grandchildren are beginning to quarrel with one another, and Noah realizes that they need to divide the earth into portions. So he decides on these different lots, and he has them choose lots, as in a lottery. The portion of the middle of the earth comes out for Shem. The portion of the north of the earth, where it is cold, comes out for Japheth or Japheth. And the portion of the south of the earth, which is where it's hot, is for Shem. Now, technically, the borders that are explained in chapter 8 and then again in chapter 9 for the subdivisions among the grandchildren of Noah are only the eastern world. The only place we get a hint about the western world is when it's talking about the plot of Japheth, and it's talking about the land to the northeast and the country east of it, which is talking about the north of North America. So we know that the north of North America belongs to Japheth. There's also a hint at the very end of the chapter in which it says that the land of Japheth is cold, the land of Shem is hot, and the land of Shem is neither hot nor cold, for it is a blend of cold and heat. And so from this, we get the map. The western world is filled in because we know that the north, where it's cold, belongs to Japheth. We know that the middle of the earth, a blend of cold and heat, belongs to Shem. And we know that the area where it's very hot belongs to Shem. The only problem in South America is that in the southwest strip of South America, we have an area that's very cold. It's a mountainous region. And so that would connect with the very south, which is already the very north because we're talking about a globe. So just as the far north is all part of Japheth, so too this area would have to be considered part of Japheth because the middle of the earth belongs to Shem. The hot areas belong to Shem. Japheth is in the north in the cold areas, but because this area is very cold and colder than any other area that belongs to Shem, I believe this area would probably be part of Japheth, although it could be Shem also, but it's not the middle of the earth. So that's why I really do believe that it's Japheth's. In the Far East, we have these areas here. Australia is known to have been settled by Africans a very long time ago, who must have traveled there by ship. Remember that when the Earth is being divided into these plots is after the period of Noah's Ark, which means that the ancestors of all of these people lived on the Ark, helped build the Ark. They got the wisdom from Noah how the Ark was built. And so they were all people who were able to get onto ships. And I was told that there were these ancient anchors found in Florida. We know that the Western world was settled a very, very long time ago. And it makes sense that they would have known to get there because ever since Noah's Ark, we would have been experts of sailing and of shipbuilding. Now, how does this apply to the events of the Middle East, for example? Let's talk about the Middle East. So in the Middle East, we have the area of Shem and we have the area of Shem that meet each other by the Nile Delta. Now, in the area of the land of Israel, the promised land of the Bible, we have the early settlers as Canaanites. Canaan was, of course, a son of Ham. He was given the plot in chapter 9 of West Africa, but instead of going to West Africa, he goes and settles to this area between Lebanon and the river of Egypt. He settles there, and the brothers tell him that he is doing the wrong thing. They all swore an oath to uphold the oath in the presence of a holy judge, who is probably an angel, and in the presence of Noah, their father, and they did not obey this oath that they took. The Canaanites, sons of Ham, went and settled the Holy Land and became cursed. They were cursed by all their brothers and cursed by God for going against this agreement that they had all made to respect these boundaries. There were cases where one brother wanted to be in another area, and so they asked permission, or they married into another area, etc. Agreements are natural and have occurred throughout history, but the idea of the Canaanites is beyond this, and they're the one son who is called out as disobeying this agreement. And so the Canaanites already can't be called indigenous to that land because they're not indigenous to that land. They were from West Africa, and they eventually went to this area between Lebanon and the river of Egypt. Similarly, for the Philistines, the ancient Philistines also, they had come from Crete, the island of Crete, which is known as Kaftor in the Bible. But the Kaftorites and the Philistines are also Hamites. They are all descendants of Ham. We have all the sources in Jubilees where this is, and the Bible, where this is clarified, but it's very clear that the Philistines and the Kaftorites descend also from Ham, and so they're in the wrong area. So this already helps a lot with this area of the Holy Land, because in the Bible, this land is promised to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The descendants of Abraham through Ishmael, meaning what becomes the Muslims and the Arabs, they are given the Arabian Peninsula. They have the entire Arabian Peninsula to populate, whereas the land of Israel belongs to the children of Israel, a special nation that God sets apart from the children of Abraham, Isaac, and specifically Jacob, who is then renamed Israel. And so in a way that solves this issue, because whoever the people in the Holy Land are, if they are Arabs, they belong in the Arabian Peninsula. That is where they are allowed to rule over, and not the Holy Land, which is to be ruled over by Israel. If they want to claim that they are ancient Canaanites or that they are descendants of ancient Philistines, then they are actually Hamites, and that they should be in the continent of Africa, in Egypt, and westward and southward from there. So this really does give a lot of clarity to the entire conflict regarding Israel and the Holy Land. But this isn't the only conflict that this comes to discuss. In Africa, we also have a lot of fighting, and this fighting tends to be between Africans and Arabs. That's what it does appear to be. Now, Africans or North Africans can accept Islam, can intermarry with Arabs, and allow them to rule their culture if they want to. But in general, the continent of Africa, other than what is east of the Blue Nile, is meant to be for the children of Ham. They are supposed to rule over it. So if there are conflicts in these areas in which Arabs are fighting with Africans, Africans should be ruling anything west of the Blue Nile, according to Jubilees, according to the oath that Noah's children and grandchildren made and swore in the presence of the Holy Judge and God and Noah. So these are very clear boundaries and clear borders. When it comes to the Western world, in current events, we have currently an administration that is talking about taking over control of Greenland, of Canada, of Mexico. And so where does all that fit in? So we have now this line that is made by using the heat map. In another video, I'll link it, we looked at the heat map, and that's how we figured out the Western world according to Jubilees. And in this heat map, it is clear that Shem's lot, which is a mix of hot and cold, includes some cold, but it's a mix of heat and cold, whereas north of this line is cold, very cold. And it is a line that does line up with the line that's going east from the Meiotis Sea, the Sea of Azov atop the Black Sea, where the Don River flows into from the mountain range that we looked at in the video in which we created these boundaries in the first place. So now that we have all the boundaries in the Western world, between America and Canada really does end up holding out as being accurate. And so the idea of taking over Canada is interesting. So the first question is, who are the Americans? Are the Americans Shemites or are they Japhethites? There are also Hamites that are in the nation of America. And so America is very much a melting pot. Many nations and many countries are melting pots today. But the question is regarding rule. First of all, there needs to be a question of, does this whole story of the Eastern world even apply to the Western world? The way we're creating this is through the heat map, but we don't talk about South America, for example, in Jubilees. And so this is a question if it's even to be included in the map or if it's all a free-for-all. But if we want to create order out of so much chaos that we have today, then we can look at these boundaries and perhaps learn something from it. So yes, generally America is a mix of Shemites and Japhethites, and there are of course Hamites as well. And so it's a question. In terms of rulership, there is a movement of Africans moving back to Africa. They were taken against their will, and so some are returning to Africa. The rulership of America traditionally has been more Europeans, European Christians specifically, but there's definitely a mixture. Now there's more Shemites there for sure. It's unclear. If America and Canada want to join together to be some sort of united front, they could do that. It would have to be done by agreement, peacefully, hopefully. But these lines aren't really set in stone. However, it is clear that Mexico would be considered part of the same, and Central America in general would be considered part of the same plot as Shem because of the weather patterns, because it is a mixture of hot and cold and it is in the middle of the earth. So while it can be separate countries, the idea that they could merge makes a little bit more sense, especially in the current events. The fact that there are cartels and there are actual threats of drugs and poisonous drugs coming from the southern border. So it does make more sense that Mexico would potentially join together with America one day, but I really don't know. I don't have answers for, what is best, but I want to show this map in order to discuss it, in order to understand how these things are separated. So the east of South America would definitely be its own thing, ruled by Hamites, and the southwest by Japhethites, and all of this could be Shemites. But there are alliances and there are pacts, and so everything can join together at the end of the day if it's done peacefully. It's only when there's major conflicts that we really, really need to go back to these borders. There aren't really major conflicts in the Western world the way that we are seeing in Africa and the Middle East, where there are major problems, and also here in Ukraine, Russia, which I'm not sure if this can help anything, but that's really all within the plot of Japheth, and so I don't really have too much insight into that. But when it does come to the Middle East and we have Hamites, people who are claiming to be descendants of the Philistines or the Canaanites, they are Hamites. And so they don't belong at all in the plot of Shem. They don't belong at all in the Middle East. In terms of rulership, in terms of the interest in having their own country and nation and self-determination, they wouldn't have that right also by right of God's will as per the Bible. But we do see that if the people are actually just Arabs and they want to say, no, we're not Philistines, we just came from Egypt 100 years ago, we just came from Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, wherever it is, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, then the real idea should be that if they don't want to live peacefully within the boundaries of Israel, as 2 million Arabs do and love it, it's a great country, Israel. So if they don't want to live peacefully and they want to continue warring, then they should generally be returned to wherever they came from. So if they're not Philistines or Canaanites, they obviously have no actual claim to the land. And so they should go back to where they are indigenous to, either Africa or the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula, if they are Arab. All right, I hope that this is a good springboard for some interesting conversation. I wonder if this could also apply to any other conflicts around the world. Please enlighten us if you know about specific conflicts going on in Africa, the Middle East, or the Western world where this might be able to help. But this is all ancient wisdom. These are ancient agreements. This is all of our history. This is not just the history of the Israelites. This is the history of mankind after the flood. This is the history of the children of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their children after them, and their children after them. So these are the agreements that we made. These are the boundaries that we agreed to respect. I had not seen anyone make a map that was intelligible, that I could understand. There were only really primitive kind of drawings trying to understand chapter 8 and 9 of Jubilees. And so I was very happy to work on this after doing the translation of Jubilees to try to create visual representation of chapter 8 and 9, which are so interesting and so relevant. All right, I hope you enjoyed this little video. We appreciate your subscriptions, comments, likes, and shares. Wishing you all the very best and many blessings to you and yours. This is Modern Jubilees, and we will see you next time.